The sky changed before anyone understood why. It didn't darken. It didn't thunder. It simply paused. Above the coastal orphanage, the morning light shimmered unnaturally, as though the sun itself hesitated. The gulls stopped mid-cry. Even the wind rolling in from the ocean felt suspended. 7-year-old Daniel Harper noticed first. He was kneeling in the sand garden behind the white stone building, carefully constructing a crooked fortress from driftwood and shells. Daniel liked building things that stood against the tide. He believed if he made them strong enough, the ocean would respect them. He looked up at the sky, squinting. The clouds weren't moving. Neither were the waves. For one fragile second, the entire horizon felt held in invisible hands. Inside the orphanage, breakfast trays clattered. Caretakers laughed softly. The television in the common room played a morning news segment about rising diplomatic tension in the outer colonies. Words too large for children to understand. Orbit, however, was not silent. 300 kilometers above Earth's atmosphere, an alien reconnaissance fleet hovered in disciplined formation. Their command vessels scanned coastlines, industrial sectors, communication hubs. One signal spiked. An energy reading. Small. Localized. The automated targeting system classified it. Probable logistical node. Secondary supply infrastructure. No human verified the reading. No alien questioned it. The fleet commander authorized a corrective orbital strike. Minimal yield. Efficient. Clinical. Intended to remove what they believed was a support structure aiding Earth's military expansion. The command was issued without emotion. Below, Daniel brushed sand off his knees. "Miss Avery," he called toward the building. "The sky looks weird." She stepped out onto the porch, shielding her eyes. And then, the light bent. There was no explosion in the way old war footage showed. No towering inferno. Only a column of brilliant white descending from the heavens. Silent, focused, impossibly precise. For a heartbeat, the world was brighter than memory. Then everything became still. The shock wave rolled outward in a widening circle, pushing air aside like a breath released by a sleeping giant. Windows shattered miles away. Ocean water recoiled from the shoreline. And then, silence. The white stone building was gone. Not shattered, not burning. Gone. Where laughter had been, there was emptiness. A wide, scorched imprint in the earth where a home once stood. Dust rose gently into the sky. Seagulls did not return. Across the planet, cameras captured it. A fishing trawler, live streaming the sunrise, caught the flash on the horizon. A traffic drone redirected by atmospheric interference recorded the impact bloom from above. Within 30 seconds, the footage was everywhere. Earth's global networks lit up. At first, confusion, then recognition, then something far more dangerous. Governments attempted to contact orbital defense grids. Military satellites scrambled. News anchors froze mid-sentence as analysts replayed the trajectory arc of the strike beam. Coordinates confirmed. It was not a military base. It was not a weapons depot. It was not infrastructure. It was St. Aurora Coastal Orphanage. An alien transmission arrived minutes later. Cold. Translated to automated diplomatic channels. Unauthorized supply node neutralized. Collateral probability acceptable. Acceptable. The word echoed across a planet of 8 billion people. In cities, traffic stopped as citizens stared at their screens. In rural towns, farmers stood motionless beside running machinery. On naval vessels and research stations, uniformed officers lowered their heads. There were no riots, no immediate retaliatory missiles, no dramatic speeches. Earth did not scream. It went quiet. In underground command facilities, senior defense officials watched the footage on loop, not for emotional reaction, but for data, trajectory angle, energy signature, fleet composition, response time. They did not argue. They did not shout. They calculated. On the ruins of the coast, smoke drifted toward the ocean. The tide returned slowly, cautiously, as if unsure whether it was permitted to move again. And somewhere beyond Earth orbit, the alien fleet adjusted formation. Confident the lesson had been delivered, they expected outrage. They expected desperate retaliation. They expected emotional instability. They did not understand humanity's most dangerous trait. When humans grieve, they remember, and when they remember, they prepare. The galaxy expected retaliation. It did not expect calculation. The United Nations Assembly Hall had never been this silent, not during border conflicts, not during economic collapses, not even during the first confirmed extraterrestrial contact. But now, after the footage had replayed on every screen on Earth, the chamber felt smaller than it ever had. Delegates sat rigid behind their desks. Flags stood motionless. The curved glass ceiling reflected a world holding its breath. At the center platform, a three-dimensional reconstruction of the strike rotated slowly in the air. Trajectory, energy profile, orbital positioning. No one needed to see it again. They watched anyway. Secretary General Amara Vance did not open with rhetoric. She did not raise her voice. Confirmed civilian target, she said quietly. Confirmed non-military structure. Casualty reports pending. Across the hall, military advisors exchanged data feeds in silence. Then the arguments began. Proportional response. One defense minister insisted. Target a comparable infrastructure asset. Demonstrate consequences without escalation. A fleet interdiction strike, another suggested. Disable one capital vessel. Force diplomatic negotiation. Sanctions will mean nothing. A European security chief muttered. They already see us as inferior. The words filled the chamber, urgent but controlled. No shouting, no theatrics. Humanity had crossed that emotional threshold already. Then a voice from the back of the chamber spoke. Calm, even. Proportionality assumes this was an accident. Heads turned. Admiral Elias Ward stood beside the strategic display, hands clasped behind his back. He was older than most of the officers present, his uniform carrying decades of quiet service rather than ceremony. It was not, he continued. It was automation. It was efficiency. It was indifference. The rotating hologram paused mid-spin. Ward's eyes did not leave the projection. They will strike again, not because they hate us, but because they calculated we are acceptable losses. A murmur rippled through the chamber. So, what are you proposing, Admiral? The Secretary General asked. Ward inhaled once. Total war doctrine activation. The phrase landed heavier than any explosion. Several delegates stiffened. That doctrine was never intended for this scale? Ward interrupted gently. Correct. The room waited. Ward gestured, and the display shifted. Alien supply networks appeared. Military shipyards. Energy relays. Hyperspace transit hubs. Strategic command clusters. This is not genocide, he said firmly. Not population annihilation. Not indiscriminate destruction. His voice hardened, not emotionally, but with certainty. This is a complete dismantling of their ability to wage war. The hologram fractured into cascading red vectors. Cyber warfare to collapse their fleet logistics. Gravitational field manipulation to deny hyperspace corridors. AI-controlled interdiction drones to neutralize weapons platforms. Economic isolation enforced by automated blockade. No nuclear firestorms. No civilian bombardments. Only removal, layer by layer, system by system. A delegate from South America spoke hesitantly. And the civilians? Evacuation corridors. Ward replied immediately. We open them ourselves. Publicly. Transparently. We demonstrate the difference between us. Another official leaned forward. And once we begin, Ward's expression did not change. We do not stop until their war capacity is zero. Silence settled again. Not fearful silence. Resolute silence. In underground facilities across Earth, artificial intelligences had already begun modeling the doctrine's activation scenarios. Thousands of simulations per second. Projected fleet responses. Countermeasures. Escalation probabilities. Civilian risk assessments. On the largest display in the chamber, probability graphs climbed steadily. Projected human victory under proportional response, 48%. Projected human victory under full total war doctrine, 93%. Projected duration of enemy war capacity post-doctrine, under 6 months. The Secretary General closed her eyes for a moment, then she opened them. Activate evacuation corridors for all known alien civilian sectors, she ordered. Prepare public transmission regarding humanitarian passage. And authorize the AI to move from simulation to implementation phase. There were no cheers, no applause, only quiet confirmations. Aye. Confirmed. Executing. Far above Earth, long-range listening stations intercepted alien internal communications. The Empire had already issued a statement across its territories. Human outrage has been observed. Response patterns consistent with predictable emotional instability. Fleet remains in dominant position. Their analysts projected scattered retaliation. Missile strikes. Symbolic gestures. Desperate shows of force. They did not detect a shift in Earth's network traffic. They did not interpret the synchronized activation of dormant gravitational platforms. They did not recognize the silence spreading across human military channels. Back in the UN chamber, Admiral Ward watched as the first phase indicators turned from amber to green. Total war doctrine. Active. Humanity had made its decision. There would be no screaming retaliation. No impulsive vengeance. Only systematic removal of the threat. They believed humans fought with anger. They were wrong. The first satellite went dark at 3:14 Galactic Standard. There was no explosion, no debris field, no visible strike. It simply stopped transmitting. Across the alien empire's outer defense grid, thousands of monitoring stations blinked from green to gray. Operators assumed interference. Solar fluctuation. Routine malfunction. Then 12 more vanished. Then 40. Then every orbital relay within the Karsa's defense ring ceased responding within a span of 8 seconds. Earth had not fired a missile. It had rewritten the battlefield. Human cyber warfare units, guided by autonomous strategic AIs, had infiltrated the Empire's communication architecture months before open conflict. They had mapped routing redundancies, identified firmware weaknesses, embedded dormant logic cascades. When activated, the cascade did not destroy hardware. It reassigned it. Satellites began transmitting false telemetry back to their own fleet command. Weapon arrays reported ammunition depletion. Long-range scanners displayed phantom gravitational anomalies. Defense platforms rotated away from actual threat vectors to face empty space. The Empire's admirals did not realize they were blind until they were already navigating darkness. Simultaneously, Phase 2 initiated. Freighter convoys carrying antimatter fuel rods experienced simultaneous routing errors. Cargo drones received conflicting instructions. Docking platforms rejected valid clearance codes. Supply chains did not explode. They tangled. Shipyards awaiting materials found their inventories missing. Fleet carriers requesting resupply found hyperspace lanes suddenly flagged as unstable. Because they were. Human gravitational manipulation arrays, previously dismissed as theoretical, activated along 3 major transit corridors. Micro-singularity anchors distorted subspace geometry just enough to render faster-than-light passages unreliable. No catastrophic collapse. Just enough instability that no admiral would risk sending a battle fleet through. Within hours, entire regions of the Empire were isolated from one another. Panic began quietly. Strategic Command convened emergency sessions. Is this sabotage? Localized insurgency? Internal malfunction? The answer arrived too late. Earth had not targeted population centers. It had not struck cities. Civilian energy grids remained intact. Public communication networks functioned normally. Evacuation corridors broadcasted openly on all frequencies. Non-combatant vessels will be escorted safely through designated humanitarian passages. No weapons. No military cargo. Alien civilian ships, hesitant and confused, tested the corridor. Human drones guided them without incident. The message was unmistakable. This was not annihilation. It was disarmament. Military infrastructure began disappearing with frightening efficiency. Orbital shipyards lost power when reactor control algorithms shut themselves down under maintenance safety protocols triggered remotely. Weapon depots discovered targeting software permanently corrupted. Fleet coordination AIs entered recursive loops and required full system resets. Resets that took hours. Hours were now fatal. On the bridge, the Imperial flagship Vraction, High Admiral Sareth watched tactical projections flicker unpredictably. Report, she demanded. Long-range sensors unreliable. Supply convoys delayed indefinitely. Defense satellites unresponsive. She narrowed her eyes at the tactical grid. Where's the human fleet? No one answered, because there was no fleet in sight. No armada advancing in glorious formation. No massive human warships breaching hyperspace in theatrical display. The Empire was accustomed to visible wars. Ships firing across voids, battle lines drawn clearly. But this felt like suffocation. By the end of the first 24 hours, 62% of the Empire's war coordination network was non-functional. By the second day, frontline fleets were rationing fuel. By the third, shipyards reported structural integrity shutdowns triggered by automated safety overrides. Humanity had not destroyed the Empire's military. It had removed its ability to function. Alien admirals began issuing orders that never reached their destinations. Commanders arrived at rally points only to find no supporting vessels. Fleet captains requested hyperspace clearance and received system warnings of gravitational instability. Confusion turned to realization. Earth was not retaliating emotionally. Earth was restructuring the war. Instead of matching strike for strike, humanity was altering the architecture of conflict itself. Every attempt at counterattack was met not with explosions, but with absence. Missiles failed to launch because launch authorization trees were quietly corrupted. Capital ships attempting to mobilize found their reactor startups stalled by internal security checks they could not override. Even the Empire's elite cyber units struggled. Every intrusion attempt into Earth's networks encountered layered decoys, self-healing firewalls, and counter-intrusion tracing so advanced it forced their systems offline. On the fourth day, the Imperial Strategic Council assembled. They replayed the initial orbital strike on Earth. Minimal yield, efficient, acceptable collateral. Then they examined current projections. War capacity degradation curve, irreversible. Estimated time to full military paralysis, 47 standard days. One junior analyst spoke the unthinkable. This is not retaliation. The chamber turned toward him. It is preemption. Across the galaxy, smaller civilizations watched carefully. They saw that Earth was not burning worlds, not targeting children, not leveling cities. They saw something far more terrifying. Humanity was demonstrating that war did not require spectacle. It required patience. Back on Earth, Admiral Ward reviewed the progression chart. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He merely nodded once. Proceed to Phase 4. In orbit above fractured supply lines, alien commanders finally understood. They had not provoked a rage-filled species. They had activated a civilization that had spent centuries studying war, so it would never need to be fought recklessly. They had bombed a building. Humanity erased an empire's future. The Empire finally chose to strike back. It took them 11 days to coordinate what remained of their fleet. 11 days of broken signals. 11 days of fuel shortages. 11 days of watching their war machines stall piece by piece. When the counteroffensive order was issued, it was less a roar of defiance and more a test of pride. 3 capital fleets mobilized from separate sectors, converging toward what their analysts believed was a vulnerable human border region. The plan was simple. Overwhelm. Demonstrate force. Restore psychological dominance. Hyperspace engines ignited. And then, navigation warnings flooded their bridges. Gravitational instability alerts. Subspace distortion flags. Emergency rerouting advisories. 2 fleets were forced to decelerate before entry. The third attempted transit anyway. It never arrived. Not destroyed. Diverted. Its exit vector redirected by subtle gravitational manipulation into deep, empty space, light years from its intended target. Stranded. Fuel limited. Alone. The Empire's admirals demanded to know where the human fleet was hiding. There were no human dreadnoughts on the horizon, no visible armada, no heroic formation charging into battle. Instead, drones, thousands of them, small, efficient, autonomous. They did not fire indiscriminately. They positioned, they observed, they enforced. Supply routes attempting to bypass blockades found themselves shadowed. Cargo vessels carrying military components received automated interdiction signals. Weapons shipments were confiscated without a single civilian casualty. Planetary defense platforms attempting to power up discovered their targeting arrays overridden remotely. The drones did not taunt. They did not threaten. They simply made resistance inefficient. Within 3 weeks, the Empire's outer colonies experienced fuel rationing. Within 4, industrial output dropped by 38%. Within 5, internal trade networks fractured under cascading shortages. Markets crashed. Energy grids flickered. Civil unrest simmered, not from bombardment, but from absence. The Empire had built its dominance on speed, expansion, and visible strength. Humanity had removed momentum. On the Imperial homeworld, the Strategic Council convened under dim lights. Economic advisors presented collapsing growth curves. Fleet commanders presented immobilization statistics. Civil administrators reported rising panic among border populations. High Admiral Sarah stood before the chamber, posture rigid. "Locate their main fleet," she ordered again. Silence answered her, because there was no fleet to find. Humanity was everywhere and nowhere, a web instead of spear. Then came the transmission. It appeared simultaneously across military channels, civilian broadcasts, and diplomatic frequencies. Clear, calm, unencrypted, a human diplomatic envoy, standing before a neutral starfield backdrop. No uniform, no weapons, only steady eyes. The message was brief. The strike on the orphanage was your first mistake. Ignoring the aftermath was your last. No threats followed. No countdown. No demands, yet only fact. Simultaneously, updated evacuation corridors expanded. Human escort drones guided alien civilian ships through stabilized hyperspace passages. Families fleeing unstable regions were scanned for weapons, then escorted safely beyond contested zones. Footage of human drones shielding refugee transports from debris storms spread rapidly across neutral systems. The galaxy watched carefully. They compared. The Empire had labeled civilian loss acceptable. Humanity labeled civilian safety mandatory, even for the enemy. That contrast became louder than any explosion. Within the Empire's borders, unrest deepened, not because of devastation, but because of doubt. If humanity could dismantle their military without targeting their cities, if humanity could enforce blockades without slaughter, then what else were humans capable of? The psychological shift was irreversible. For the first time in centuries, imperial governors questioned Central Command openly. For the first time in recorded expansion history, member systems delayed tribute shipments. Confidence cracked. And when confidence fractures, empires tremble. In Earth's underground command complex, Admiral Ward reviewed the status board. War capacity degradation, 81%. Projected full military paralysis, 19 days. He folded his hands behind his back. Open preliminary diplomatic channel, he instructed. Across the void, in a chamber that had not known surrender for generations, the Empire faced reality it could not bomb away. Their fleets were not destroyed. Their worlds were not burning. But their future campaigns were mathematically impossible. The realization settled slowly. Heavy, unavoidable. For the first time in centuries, the Empire asked for terms. The Empire did not surrender. Empires rarely do. They requested dialogue. The distinction mattered. A neutral star system was chosen, far from contested space. No fleets assembled. No grand formations of warships floated in intimidation. Only a single human diplomatic vessel and a single Imperial envoy craft held position in quiet orbit around a pale blue star. No weapons powered. No targeting systems active. Inside the human vessel, Admiral Elias Ward stood beside civilian representatives and legal advisors. He wore a standard uniform, unadorned, no medals displayed. Across from them, projected through a secure diplomatic link, the Imperial High Council waited. The Empire expected demands for territory, retaliatory strikes, dominion. They did not expect the list presented. The human envoy spoke clearly. Condition 1. Full war reparations allocated to reconstruction of all civilian damage incurred. A pause. Condition 2. Establishment of an independent interstellar war crimes tribunal. The authorization of the orbital strike will be reviewed. The chamber on the Imperial side shifted uncomfortably. Condition 3. Permanent disarmament oversight. Human and neutral observers embedded within your fleet infrastructure until compliance is verified. The words were firm, not shouted. Condition 4. Formal recognition of Earth's sovereignty and protected status under galactic law. No threats followed. No promise of annihilation. Only the quiet implication that refusal would restart a war the Empire could not win. The Imperial Council deliberated for hours. Their fleets remained paralyzed, their supply chains unstable, their economic projections irreversible without external relief. Pride weighed against survival. Survival won. The terms were accepted. Across the galaxy, the news spread. There was no footage of triumphant human warships, no cheering crowds in city squares. On Earth, people watched the announcement in silence. Then they returned to work, because rebuilding mattered more than celebrating. Weeks later, construction crews gathered on the coastline where St. Aurora Orphanage once stood. The scorched earth had been cleared. Foundations were laid deeper this time, reinforced with materials designed to withstand storms and time. The new building rose gradually, stronger, brighter, wider windows facing the sea, gardens rebuilt, playgrounds reinforced. Not a fortress, a home. At the edge of the site, a simple memorial stood facing the ocean. No grand statues, no dramatic inscriptions, only names, and a single line etched beneath them. Some lines are not warnings. They are boundaries. On the day the new orphanage opened, no global broadcast was scheduled. No military flyovers crossed the sky. Children walked through the doors first. Caretakers followed. Laughter returned carefully. Tentative at first, then stronger. Admiral Ward arrived without escort fanfare. He stood near the memorial for several minutes, hands behind his back. The ocean breeze moved gently across the stone. He did not salute. He did not speak. He simply watched the building, ensured it stood. Across space, Imperial oversight teams cooperated under human supervision. Fleet production lines were dismantled, weapons stockpiles inventoried. Strategic expansion halted. The Empire would recover, but it would remember, and so would the rest of the galaxy. Humanity had demonstrated something far more enduring than destruction: restraint with teeth, compassion with limits, power directed, not unleashed blindly. Back at the shoreline, children's voices carried across the sand. The sky above them was clear, and this time it did not hesitate. Humanity did not unleash total war because it hated. Humanity unleashed it because some lines cannot be crossed twice.